Hello everyone and welcome to this month's presentation from I&E of our CCNA Kickoff. Let me go ahead and start here. So in case you haven't seen anything from me before, I will be your instructor or presenter today. My name is Keith Bogart, and you can see there ways to reach out to me. So if you have any questions after this session is done, any questions that you thought of that you didn't have a chance to get answered, you can see there's some ways to reach out to me to get those questions answered. Also, one thing I want to point out before I proceed any further, if you do have questions pertaining to CCNA preparation or the CCNA exam itself or technical topics regarding the CCNA exam, in just a moment I'm going to show you something that we call the I&E online community, which is a way, it's basically an online forum. It's a way for you to post your comments online, post your questions online, so that hundreds of people can see it, and you'll be getting a response much more quickly if you use that forum. Also, the thing I like to stress is that when you put your questions on there and you get your answers back, you're helping other people as well, because other people can learn and grow from what they saw the question you put on and the answer that you got back. So I'm always available to reach out to. I would prefer, though, that you put your questions on I&E's online community first, and I'll show you how to get to that in just a moment. But if a couple of days go by and no one has responded to your question, which is highly unlikely, but if that does happen, feel free to reach out to me. So let's talk about what are the objectives of this presentation today. This is not a technical presentation. This is not to help you in your, as you're studying for your CCNA to learn some of the technical topics. This session is for people who are before that, before they're getting into that. So let's talk a little bit about it. So the person I have in mind who is really going to get the most out of this presentation today is someone who is thinking about pursuing their CCNA. They've sort of gotten the idea that the CCNA would be a valuable thing either in their existing career or changing careers, and they want to know more about it. They want to know, okay, what's the next step? Where do I go to start studying? What test do I take? Or is there more than one test I have to take? How do I sign up for the test? Once I start preparing, what's a roadmap? What are some tools and things available to me to help make my study time as efficient and effective as possible? And what are some common pitfalls as I'm studying? What are some things that other people have run across that have derailed their studying attempts? And how can I know about that in advance so I can prepare and avoid those pitfalls? So that's really what this presentation is about. It's not a technical presentation. It's all about mentally preparing you for the CCNA and guiding you as you start that process. So before I proceed any further, let me show you I&E's online community so you are familiar with how to reach that, because I'm sure you probably will have questions moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and make this full screen here so you can see a little bit better. In the event that you've never gone to I&E's online community before, it is totally and completely free. I mean, you have to register for it, but there's no credit card or anything required. So just go to members.ine.com. Okay, now if you have not registered before, you will be prompted to register for this. It's basically just your email address and your name. That's it. And then you'll be taken here to our members dashboard. And from here, you can see a whole bunch of stuff like upcoming shows, upcoming live boot camps we have. But what I want to draw your attention to is up here in the upper right corner where it says Connect. So if you click on that, very first link is the I&E online community. And this is not just for CCNA as well. There's a lot of other places in here that you could go to. But for the purposes of this, if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see under Cisco, first link is Cisco CCNA. So if we click on that, I would probably recommend that you post your comment in the second forum here, CCNA. As you can clearly see, 1.3 thousand comments of these CCNA related forums. This one is by far the most active. So you can just click on that. And then from in here, you could do a search and see if maybe somebody has already posted a question related to what you're thinking about. But if not, you can always just start a new discussion. Just click on that and type in a discussion title. And I would definitely recommend, as with any forum, that when you type in your discussion title, try to make it as most specific as possible. In other words, if your title is something like, please help, or I don't understand, or confused, no one's going to read that because it's so generic it could mean anything. So you want to put in a title of something specific to what you're related to, like job opportunities for CCNA, or what are the best books to study, or having problem with OSPF neighbor relationships, something like that, so that when someone reads the title, they can say, ah, that sounds like something I think I can answer, rather than just ignoring it. So type in your title as specific as possible, and then here you can put in your question stem, right, which is basically, educational speak for your question. So just type in your question there, put post discussion, and literally within a few hours at the most, you should have an answer from somebody about your question. So that's good for, like I said, technical questions, questions about preparation, questions about other people's experiences. Hey, how soon did you get a job after getting your CCNA? Or, what types of CCNA related questions did you get during an interview? Or anything you might think up. Great resource for that. So I wanted to point that out because that is a very useful place to go. Okay, so let's talk about the testing experience. Also, before I get a little bit further here, this is a live session right now on YouTube Live, and the way I've sort of structured these slides is I have like little sections, and after each section I'm going to break and I'm going to check for Q&A. Okay, so I'm going to go through 5, 10, 15 minutes worth of slide material, talking about things, showing you various screenshots and websites, and then I'll check YouTube and see if you guys have any outstanding questions. So while I'm talking, while I'm lecturing, feel free to type in your questions. There's a lot of people, this is something we do every month, the CCNA Kickoff. So, previous ones have been recorded, and a lot of times when we do this, people join the YouTube live session who already have their CCNA, who have a lot of experience. So as you post your question, you'll probably get responses right now as you post your question. Just be aware though that I won't be looking at the questions until I get done with my little snippet here of presentation and I go into the Q&A session. But that shouldn't stop you from posting your question because there's a lot of other people on there who can probably answer it for you. Okay, so let's start talking about like the practical thing here. How do I get my CCNA? Well, you should be aware that you have a choice. You could take 2 individual tests called the ICND-1 or the ICND-2, or you could take 1 test, which is what we call the composite exam. Let me show you a little bit more about this. So I would recommend that as I go along here, you frequently use your own browser and follow along with what I'm showing you, and maybe you can, bookmark stuff as we go along so that by the time we're done today, you got a whole bunch of CCNA resources bookmarked that you can go back to. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back up. And let's go to our good friend Google. And here I'm just going to type in Cisco CCNA. And let's go to the very first link that comes up here. Okay, so here you can see, let me go ahead and expand that a little bit more, that you've got 2 individual exams, the 100-105, which is called the ICND-1, and the 200-105, which is the ICND-2. Now, if you get both of those, if you take and you pass both of those, then you got your CCNA. And Cisco will mail you a nice little folder with a CCNA certification inside of it. Or alternatively, you could take this one, what we call composite exam, the 200-125 exam, which pulls questions from both the ICND-1 and the ICND-2 into this one composite exam. Now, frequently, I will get questions from people, what's the best exam to take? Is it better to take the composite or the ICND-1 and the ICND-2? So let me just give you my perspective on that. If you are someone who has little to no networking experience, okay, so you are pretty much starting at this at ground zero. Maybe you're even coming from a completely non-technical field. You're coming from human resources or marketing or sales or something. You're thinking, you know what? I think it would help me to get a CCNA, but you have no technical knowledge whatsoever, other than, opening up your laptop and using the business applications you use at your current job. Then I would not recommend that you take the composite exam. In that case, you definitely want to take the 2 separate exams. You want to start with the ICND-1, pass that, and then go to the ICND2. The composite exam is really best for someone who has been working with computer networks to some degree, for at least 6 months minimum. Somebody who knows some of the basics of, for example, let me throw out some terms. If you know sort of at a high level what these terms are, take the composite exam. IP address, Ethernet, LAN and WAN, routing protocol, MAC address table, EIGRP OSPF, VLANs, VLAN trunks. Now, as I was doing that, if you were just like, huh, what? If you just became like a deer in the headlight look as I was throwing those terms out at you, take the separate exams. Take the ICND1 and the ICND2. But as I was throwing those terms out at you, if you were able to visualize what they were, how they're used in a network, and ideally if you've even had some hands-on experience with them, great. Take the composite exam. Take that 200-125. But most people typically pursue the 2 separate exams. Another common question I get is, how long should I take to prepare for this? That is a real subjective question. It really depends a lot on, how quickly you can memorize things, because there's a lot of memorization involved here, how much time you can afford to dedicate to this on a daily and weekly basis, what your current experience level is. So I'll just throw out sort of like a broad, generic brush with this one. I would say that if you're starting at ground level 0, if you can dedicate a minimum of 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and then on the weekends, a minimum of 4 hours on Saturday and another 4 hours on Sunday. So whatever that adds up to. If you can dedicate that every single week, week after week, you should be prepared enough to take your ICND1 exam within, I'd say 3 to 4 months. And then repeat that same amount of time, and then another 3 to 4 months after that, you should be able to get your ICND2. Sometimes it takes people a little bit longer. Now, there have been cases of people, for example, I've talked to people who were unemployed, and due to their current circumstances, they had the luxury of just heads down studying for this stuff like 6 or 7 hours a day, every day. They didn't have a job they had to go to. They could focus on this. If that describes you, and you've got that kind of dedication and you can memorize things really well, you could probably get ready to pass your ICND1 within like 2 months. But anything less than a couple of months, if you're starting at ground 0, is just not practical. So I would sort of budget anywhere from like 3 to 5 months per exam, just as a rough outline right there. Okay, so that being the case, let's move on right here. So those are the actually there's more to talk about here. So now you see the exams, and how do you register for one? And by the way, as I move forward, I'll be talking more about, well, what's in the exam? Where do I go to find out what the subjects are I need to study for? We'll talk about that. But before we do that, while we're still on this page here, I want to point out how to schedule an exam. So let's go back and go to the ICND1, because that's probably the first one you're going to schedule. The process is the same no matter what. So right here in the upper right corner, it says register at Pearson VUE. Pearson VUE is Cisco's official learning partner, testing partner. You see, these exams for CCNA and CCNP and CCIE are all what's called proctored exams. What's the difference? Well, an unproctored exam would be an example of like an exam you could take on your own laptop at your house. No one's looking over your shoulder. You take it at your own convenience, your own time. That's an unproctored exam. These exams are proctored exams, which means you're going to have to go to a testing center that is owned, managed, and run by Pearson VUE. You're going to have to schedule that in advance, a date and a time, and when you show up, you're going to sit down, and there's going to be cameras in the ceiling. They're going to log you into a computer, and you're going to have a certain time frame at their center to take this exam. And I'll talk more about, what to expect there, but that's what I mean by a proctored exam. So that's why you have to register at Pearson VUE, because Pearson VUE is the company Cisco uses to do that. And Pearson VUE has thousands of testing centers all over the world. So you'll click right there, register at Pearson VUE, and it'll take you to this site. So from here, you'll sign in. And if you don't already have a username and account, you can just create one. So I'm going to sign in here with what I believe are my credentials. All right, so here we're going to want to do exam catalog proctored exams. That's what we want. And let's go back here. We want the 100-105. So I'll just put that in there. And there it is, the very first one. Go. And you have a choice of language. Let's just do it in English. Next. Okay, you can see that this exam is $165. So let me just speak briefly to that too. Another question sometimes people have is, well, from a financial perspective, am I going to save a lot of money by taking the one exam versus the two separate exams? And the answer is no. The two separate exams, as you just saw right here, are $165 each, which ends up being $330 total, I believe, if I'm doing my math right. Well, if you take the one composite exam, that's like $320 or $325. So yes, you will save like $5 or $10, but it's not significant. So don't let money be a deciding factor for you as far as which of these exams you should take. All right, so we're going to schedule this exam. Do I promise not to cheat or tell people the questions? Yes, I do promise that. So next. All right, so from here, you would just type in your address of where you live or maybe where you're working, and it'll pull up a bunch of testing centers close to where you are. I'm just going to pick this first one right here. And then once you identify the testing center, hit next. Now we're going to be given some dates and times. So let's say I want to take it tomorrow, the 9th. And you can see there's some time slots available. I'll take it at 10:30 in the morning. And I think at this point, this is where I'm not going to proceed any further. Yeah, because if I click add to order or whatever, it's going to charge my credit card, and I don't want to do that. So, but this is where you would pay for it, and then you're done. You got scheduled, and you are ready to go. So that is how you schedule your exams. Okay, so we've talked about, the quantity of exams. You've got one composite or two separate ones. I've talked about the pros and cons of taking the two separate ones versus the composite exam. I've talked about the financial aspect, that you're not really going to save any money taking the one versus the two. And I've shown you how to register for it and how to get a date and time and location. So let's move on to the testing experience. Number one, what should you expect when you walk into the testing center? Okay, so you've done your 3 to 5 months of preparation and you think you're ready. So you schedule it, you walk in. What to expect? Number one, expect to give up to them. Well, okay, let me back up here. You're going to sign in. So you're going to have to sign in, and you're going to have to present them with two forms of identification, like a driver's license and a credit card, or a passport and a credit card. Something to prove that you're not taking the exam for your friend and pretending to be him or her because you know Cisco stuff and your friend doesn't. They want to try to prevent that kind of thing from happening. Once you sign in, then they're going to ask you to basically relinquish any possible thing that could be used for cheating. So for example, your phone, you're going to have to give to them. Your keys, you're going to have to give to them. Your watch, you're going to have to give to them. If you've got a fake eye, you're going to have to pop that out of your head and give it to them. Your tablet, certainly. So by the time you actually walk in to take the exam, all you're going to have is your body and your clothes. And they'll probably ask you to relinquish your clothes in a couple of months here. But I mean, it's literally, they want to really prevent you from cheating. So they're going to take all that stuff. And depending on the testing center you go to, it could go one of two directions. I've been in some testing centers where they actually have rows of lockers on the wall. And you just go up, you pick a locker, you put your stuff in there, and then you get to take the key. You lock it up and you take the key with you. I've been to other testing centers that I don't like as much, where they basically take the stuff from you. Like they pull out just a desk drawer that's compartmentalized and they put your stuff into one of those compartments, they close it and they lock it. So either way you slice it, you're not going to be able to carry those things with you into the actual testing experience. Which also I want to emphasize, sometimes people are under the erroneous impression that they can bring a calculator into the CCNA exam. No, you cannot. So as you're learning stuff like binary and hexadecimal and IP addressing and subnetting, don't be fooled into thinking that you can just do it on a calculator. You will have no calculators available. Some people think, oh, well, the laptop or the PC they're going to set me down in front of where I'm actually going to do the exam. There's a calculator on that. No, there's not. You have to be able to do everything from your head. There's no tools, online or otherwise, available to you to shorten it or to make things easier. So just be aware of that. All right, so you've relinquished everything, and what they're going to give to you is like an 11 by 17 or 8.5 11 sheet of paper that's like laminated on both sides, 1 or 2 dry erase markers, a dry erase eraser, and some earplugs. And that's what you're going to walk into the testing center with. Then they're going to walk you into a room, and there's going to be a row of computers in like separate cubes. And I wasn't kidding. You're going to look up and you're going to see video cameras all around. And they're going to sit you down in front of a particular computer, and they're going to log you in. Once they leave, now you're facing the computer, and it says, "Welcome, Keith Bogart. Would you like to have a tutorial of the exam?" And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. And if you want to take the tutorial, it's optional. It'll run through like what the exam questions look like. Like this is what this kind of question looks like. Here's another type of question you might see. This does not count towards your time limit. Once you're done with the tutorial, it's up to you to press the start button. Now, I suppose you could, sit there for 5 or 10 minutes, but you don't want to sit there for too long because there's other people waiting behind you for the next available time slot. A lot of times what I and other people recommend is that before you press the start button, and once you press the start button on the test, you've got a defined amount of time. I believe it's 90 minutes. We'll look into that in just 1 second to verify that, but you've got a certain amount of time to complete the exam. So before you start the exam, especially if this is your first time taking it, I recommend taking that laminated sheet of paper and your dry erase board and your dry erase marker and just taking a few minutes to do like a real quick brain dump. For example, there were probably some things that you really spent a lot of time memorizing, maybe even in your car just before you walked into the testing center. You said, okay, I just learned about the OSI model. I got to remember those 7 layers and their names. What is it? What is it? What is it? And you memorize it. So you're walking in the testing center, internally in your mind, you're going, okay, layer 7 is this, layer 6 this. As soon as you sit down there, blah, 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 write it down on your dry erase marker. Write down, the OSI model. Write down your TCP, UDP port numbers. Write down those nitty-gritty little factoids that are just a pain to memorize, but you got to memorize it for the exam anyway. Take, 3 or 4 minutes to do that, so that by the time you press the start button on the exam, you've got a little cheat sheet for you that you've made right there. So you don't have to worry about memorizing that stuff. It's there, it's written down. Then start the exam. All right, so what is the format of the test questions? What will this exam actually look like as you're going through it? And for that, I'm going to refer us back to Cisco's website again. So let's go ahead and make this full screen. So you can see here that it doesn't really matter which of these 3 exams you select. This next part's going to be exactly the same. So once again, I'm just going to select the ICND 1. And right here, you can see where it says Review Type of Exam Questions. You can click on that. And you'll probably need to right-click and select Play. If this doesn't work for you in your browser, try choosing like another browser. Sometimes I've found that like in Internet Explorer and stuff, it doesn't work. Just try a different browser. All right, so these are the types of exam questions you're going to come across. The first one is multiple choice, single answer. That's pretty simple. Multiple choice, multiple answer. And notice one thing here. This is nice. It actually tells you how many answers to select. So you won't have to guess, oh man, are they looking for 2 answers? Or are they looking for 3 answers? It'll say, choose 3, choose 2. I'm going to pause right here. I would say that probably 80 to 85% of all the questions you get are going to be one of these two types here, either multiple choice, single answer, or multiple choice, multiple answer. That's going to take up the vast majority of them. So what else might you see? Well, the next one you could see is drag and drop. I typically see one or two of these. You're not going to get a whole lot of these questions, but you will see one or two, maybe three at the absolute most. I don't think I've ever seen one of these where you actually fill in the blank. Clearly, they've written it into the exam engine to where it's a possibility, but I've taken the CCNA many, many times. I frequently take it just to refresh myself on what's in there, what types of topics do they stress, what level of difficulty are they asking, and I can't recall ever getting a fill in the blank. All right, this is what I affectionately call the dreaded router simulation question, and I call it this because this one type of question can easily burn up a lot of your time, like 5 minutes or more on one of these questions here. So essentially, you'll be given some sort of objective, configure this feature, configure this protocol, make this thing work. And then you'll be shown a topology like we just saw, and you'll be able to click on the devices, and then it's like you're actually in a router or a switch. And then you get to use your knowledge of the Cisco iOS command line to make it work, to configure the feature, configure the protocol. So like I said, these things can burn up a lot of your time. The good thing is you're not going to get a lot of these. I've taken the CCNA sometimes where I just had one router simulation. I think the most I ever had was 4 router simulations, so you can expect to get somewhere between 1 and 4 of these. Then there's the testlet. I really hate these because even though it's one question, one question out of the 55 you might get, you can see here it's actually multiple questions built into one. So you'll be given some sort of scenario. You'll have to select an answer from the multiple choice, and then you'll get another multiple choice, and then another multiple choice. So this is multiple questions all rolled into one. And then there is the simlet. Similar to the thing that we just saw, this is also multiple questions rolled into one, but this is kind of like a simulation where you get to log into a device and then you answer the multiple choice question based on what you see. What's different between this and a router simulation is the router simulations typically are asking you to configure something, make something work, configure something from scratch. These are more testing your ability to diagnose, monitor, and troubleshoot something. So while you're logging into a device in a simlet, you're not really logging into it to make something work. You're logging into it so it can test your knowledge of, do you know the correct verification commands? The Cisco iOS commands that begin with the word show this, show that, show something else, to where you can identify the problem or you can identify the answer to the question. And I believe that is it. Yeah, so those are the 7 different kinds of questions that you will see. All right, something else I want to talk about, and then we'll get to the Q&A for this session right here. How well did I do? So a very, it's a very natural human response that, you want to know how you did when you exit the exam. And you will be given that information to a limited degree. So when you're finally done and you press submit on the very last question, at the very end there, it will instantly tell you what your score is. In just a moment, I'll tell you, what the best possible perfect score is and what a passing score is. But it'll say, congratulations, you passed with a score of such and such. Or, I'm sorry, but you didn't quite pass. Here's your score. So you'll know what your score was. In addition to that, once you walk out of that room and you go back to collect your keys and your wallet and your cell phone and everything, the test administrator will give you a printout, a piece of paper that shows you how well you did. Now, the thing about this score report, though, is that it doesn't go into a lot of nitty-gritty detail. It won't say, oh, here was an OSPF question number 1 and you answered this incorrectly. Here's a question on IP addressing, you did that one wrong. It doesn't do that. You see, all of the questions, all of the topics within the CCNA are sort of compiled into anywhere from 5 to 7 high-level categories, like routing protocols, LAN switching technologies, WAN technologies. And so that's what your score report will look like. It'll have these 5 or 7 different categories. Let me just show you what those categories look like. So here, if I go to, once again, the ICND-1 exam, and I click on Review the Exam Topics, and we'll come back to this. So you see here, for the ICND-1, here are the 5 high-level categories: network fundamentals, LAN switching fundamentals, and so on and so forth. And it tells you what percentage of questions in the exam you can expect to get from each category. Well, when you're done with the exam and you get your score report, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see, oh, network fundamentals, I got 99%. LAN switching fundamentals, wow, I really blew that one. I only got 12%. I got 65% on routing fundamentals. So that's the only level of detail you're going to get as far as your score is concerned, is what percent you got correct on each one of those categories. So with that, I'd like to take a moment now to check the YouTube live stream and just see if there's any unanswered Q&A I can get to. So let me bring that up right here. Someone expects free food. Good luck. Yeah, you're not going to get free food when you take your CCNA, so fill up on your caffeine and your coffee before you go in there. Absolutely. Wow, some person walked in, they didn't even take away their phone. Woo! Not my experience, man. They take away pretty much everything but my eyeglasses when I walk in there. What else? What other questions do we have here? Michael Taylor, wow, you got some good comments in here. Let's see, what else? All right, well, I don't see right now any unanswered questions. It looks like the few questions that were posted have already had answers to them. So let's go ahead and just keep moving on here. Fantastic. All right. So, the topics. What do you study? How do you know what to study? Where do you find information to study? That's what I'd like to talk about right here in this section called The Topics. So, your very first place you should go is what we just looked at briefly, and I'm going to go into it in a little bit more details, what we call the CCNA blueprints. So let's take a look at the CCNA blueprints here. Let's go back to where we were. All right, so I'm going to make this full screen. So let me go back so just to refresh your memory on how I got to this. All right, so from right here, once again, how did I get here in case you forgot? I just went to Google. I typed in Cisco CCNA, clicked on the first link, and blam, there we are. Okay, let's take a look at the ICND-2 as an example. So I'm going to click on the test name here, 200-105. And all of these Cisco exams, somewhere on the main homepage, you're going to see there's a link that says Review the Exam Topics. That will take you to what we call the exam blueprint. So here's the high-level topics, which doesn't do you a whole lot of good from a studying perspective. So let's just click on one of these show details here. So LAN switching technologies. So when you expand that, these are the topics you should focus on. And each one of these you can expand and you can see what the subtopics are. So that gives you your first line of defense, your first idea as far as, okay, what do I need to research now? Next question is, if I was looking at this, I'd be thinking, okay, well, STP root bridge selection. Where would I go to find information on that? And how much level of depth do I need? Well, to answer that, I typically recommend a couple of things. So I recommend that people start with Cisco's the official Cisco Press books, specifically Cisco Press, which is like the company that comes out with Cisco's official books. They come out with 2 sets of books for every exam. There's something called an official certification guide, and there's another set of books called a foundation learning guide. The foundation learning guide typically has more material in it. It goes into greater depth. The official certification guide, the nice thing about that is it's got a lot of questions in there and sample exams and practice questions. So the combination of the 2 of them is ideal. Now, where do you get these books? Now, certainly you can go to Amazon or something and order it, but I want to make a little plug here for Safari Online Books because I just think this is awesome. If you go to Google and you do a search on Safari, you know, like I'm going on a safari in Africa, Safari Books Online. So right here. So Safari Books Online is a website where they have literally thousands of books that you can access by paying either a monthly or a yearly subscription cost. Now, it's not cheap necessarily, but when you consider that, you know, just one Cisco book, just one book on like an official certification guide can easily cost you $35 or $40. Once you've purchased 2 books, you've just purchased a month or 2 of access on Safari Online Books where you could have read those books and thousands of other books. So once you go here, you would purchase a subscription to, you know, whatever levels, whatever you want, a month or a year or 6 months. And then I would search for Cisco, and let's do 200-105. Type in the exam number. And you'll see there's all sorts of books here for studying that particular exam. Now, I typically recommend Cisco Press books and the official certification guide. Why is that? My sort of philosophy is this, is that, you know, there's a lot of people out there who are very smart, who could pass any one of these exams, you know, holding their breath and closing their eyes, and who can write very, very good books. Great. But if I'm reading a book to prepare for an exam, I want to ensure 2 things. Number 1, I want to try to have some sort of guarantee, some sort of warm fuzzies that all of the topics I'm going to see in the exam, or I might see in the exam, are covered by the book. I want to make sure of that, that's not leaving anything out. And I want to make sure that for every topic that's in there, it's going into the appropriate level of depth. I want to make sure it's not too easy, leaving stuff out. I want to make sure it's not getting into too hard of a depth that would be for the next certification, the next level of certification, like a CCNP or a CCIE. I want it to be just right. Well, if I'm reading a book from Cisco Press, that means that whoever wrote that book, it might be a Cisco employee, it might not, but that book was run through the Cisco process. Some editors at Cisco read through each chapter as it was being written, and they gave it their blessing. They said, yes, this is appropriate. This is the appropriate topic. This is the appropriate depth. Whereas if you read a book that's not a Cisco Press book, you don't have any guarantees of that. It might be a fantastic book, might be really good for learning, but it might not give me those 2 guarantees I'm looking for. That's why I like going with the Cisco Press stuff. So from here, I would actually search on Cisco 200-105 and the word official. Let's try and narrow it down. And there we go, official certification guide. And you'll see also they got videos in here as well, but I'm not so much concerned with the videos. And notice also there is official certification guides, and a lot of these books have an academic edition. I briefly went through these to try to see sort of what the difference was between them. And from what I can see, the official certification guides have, at the beginning of every chapter, a quiz. It's sort of like, do I know this quiz? Whereas the academic editions don't seem to have that. But maybe the academic edition has other stuff. But anyway, go on the official certification guide, click it, view the table of contents, and here you've got the entire book at your disposal. So for example, if I want to read, if one of the blueprints had a bullet point that said AAA authentication, and my question was, okay, well, what topics, because that's a huge topic, what topics within AAA authentication do I need to know, and what level of detail? We can see right here in the table of contents where it says very clearly AAA authentication. I can click on that, and I can read it right here. And this should be the appropriate level of depth, and it should cover everything I might need to know that will be thrown at me on the exam. So that's the first place I would look. And once again, if you can't afford Safari online books, no problem. Just, order the book from Amazon or something like that. But at a very basic minimum, I would purchase the ICND-1 official certification guide and the ICND-2 official certification guide. Then, if you've got the extra funds and you can afford it, I would also purchase the foundation learning guides for both of those. With those 4 books, you should be set. Another great thing here about Safari, just to keep plugging away at this, is that if I go to their homepage, if you are like me, I don't learn best by reading about something in one source, one book, and then that's it, I'm good to go. I like to read about the same topic from like multiple sources. Read a paragraph here, read a paragraph on that same topic from another book, from a website, listen to a video on that topic. And then as I hear the same thing presented in multiple different ways, that's when it starts to gel. That's when I start to get the mental visualization of how something works. So let's say I'm learning about, let's pick a topic here. How about OSPF? So I've already read through the official certification guide, the chapter on OSPF. I've read through the foundation learning guide on OSPF. I want to keep learning it. I want to look at other sources. Well, right here in the upper right corner, I could just click on OSPF. Let's do something more specific than that. OSPF designated router. That's a topic within OSPF. And then it will come up with not necessarily just Cisco books, but any book that contains that topic of OSPF and designated router. I probably should have put designated router in parentheses or in quotes, but you can see here, it's like going to Barnes & Noble and sitting down with like 6 or 7 or 10 books in front of you to do research, except it's all online right here. Now, let's say another common question I get from people is, which book is the best? Let's say you already have the official certification guidebooks, or for whatever reason, you just don't want to use them. Well, you're still faced with the daunting challenge of there are dozens and dozens of Cisco CCNA books out there. If you're going to buy one, how do you spend your money wisely on one that you like? And I'd like to show you this as well. You're probably already familiar with this, but just in case you're not, let's all go to Amazon, Amazon.com. And here, I'm going to go ahead and type in Cisco 200-105. This is what I want to show you here. So let's pick one, for example, let's pick Todd Lamel's book, because he's also a very famous author. If we click on that, a lot of books available within Amazon.com have this great feature that you can see right here, which is called the Look Inside feature. I love this, especially for books here. If you click on that, a small section of the book is available as a sample for you to read. And we can scroll through this. And what's my objective of looking at this? My objective is, before I spend, $25, $30, $40 on a book, I want to answer the question, do I like the author? Do I like the way that he or she has written things? Do I like the examples this person has come up with? Are there graphics in the book? Pretty pictures for me to look at. Do they make sense? Can I understand the graphics? Are there quiz questions to test for my understanding? I want to answer that before I spend money on a book. And in the look inside section here, I can just scroll through this. Let's just go down several pages here, and I can start answering those questions. Jiminy Christmas, there's a lot of stuff here. Objectives. Okay, so there are quiz questions. I love it. So this book does have some questions on it. That's good. A lot of questions. That's even better. I love books that have lots of questions so I can test to see if I understand it. Internetworking. All right, so let's go through here. Oh, good. There's a graphic. Hey, Sally, Bob, Hub, Sally. So that graphic makes sense to me. More graphics. Okay, so I would just spend a little bit of time reading through this, and I would come to the conclusion, yep, this looks good. I think I could hang with this book. Let's go ahead and buy this. That's a great tool for you, is the look inside feature that Amazon has. They don't have that available for every book, but for a lot of them, they do. And clearly, you know, research stuff online. For example, when you're learning about the EIGRP successor. Now you might be thinking, what the heck is that? Well, that's something you'll learn. You know, when you're studying for your CCNA, you'll learn what that term is. And great, you know, just go to Google and type in that term in quotation marks and see if you can find any hits on that. Now, another great place, of course, is our videos, right? That's what I&E is known for, is our video series. Now I want to show you some examples of what we have. So once again, if you log into members.ine.com, there's a couple of ways you can find this out. If you click on All Access Pass, that will take you to streaming.ine.com. And you can also just go directly here as well, just from your website, streaming.ine.com. Now, if you don't have an I&E All Access Pass, you won't be able to play all these videos. But from here, you can get a really good feel for what videos do we have. So in this case, we were on Cisco. That's what we want to go to. And then we're interested in the CCNA, routing and switching. So you can see all these videos. These are our series of videos or video courses related to the CCNA routing and switching. So you can see here, there's a whole section here just on spanning tree that Travis created. Here's a practice exam that I created, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Here's 39 hours of videos I created on the CCNA routing and switching technologies. The newer ones, the ones that were created a couple of years ago, are the 200-105 ICND2 and the 100-105 ICND1. And if you click on any of these, view course, you can see the titles of the videos. Now from here, if you have not purchased the course or if you don't have an All Access Pass, this is probably about as far as you can get. But at least you can get a good idea of, you know, what videos do we have that are on the topic that you're interested in, specifically CCNA routing and switching. So I would definitely recommend that you spend some time going through the videos as well. So we've talked about Cisco Press books, we've talked about CCNA videos. So the major objective of this session was to answer the question, how do I discover what topics might potentially be on the exam? And you started with the Cisco blueprints for the exam. And then, where do I go to study those topics? Ensuring that wherever I go is teaching me the topics to a sufficient level of technical detail that's appropriate for the exam I'm about to take. And I said, start out with the Cisco Press books. From there, branch out to other books, branch out to websites, and also check out our I&E videos as well. So, I'd like to pause here as this section's done and see if there are any unanswered questions I could help with. So let's go ahead and go back to the YouTube stream here and see if I can help anybody out. All right, let's see. I don't see an immediate answer to this, to Juan's question. What's the difference between CCENT and the CCT? The CCT, the Cisco Certified Technician, is really geared for people who are going to become Cisco field engineers. It's the foundation course, it's the foundation certification, and everything's built from there. It's really designed for people whose job it will be to like go to a customer site or go inside of a data center, swap out faulty hardware. So it teaches you, how do you recognize a serial number on a device? Where do you look for that? How do you recognize what a console port is, where you plug in to get access to something? How do you recognize the different types of cables? If somebody says, hey, swap out this Ethernet cable, swap out this multimode fiber cable, what does that mean? And how do you know what to look for? So it's really geared towards people who are going to be field engineers, going in and doing basic hardware swapping, software upgrades, and preliminary stuff like that. So that's what the CCT is really geared towards. The CCENT goes into that as well. The CCENT does not spend as much time on hardware as the CCT does. The CCENT spends more time on protocols and theory. For example, the CCT, if you go onto Cisco's website, they have CCT training, which is about 6.5 hours total duration. Now, I also created a CCT course, which I think is about like 20 hours in duration. But the CCENT, there's a lot more to it. The CCENT, a training course would be, a good 25, 30 hours minimum of training for that. There's a lot more to know for the CCNT. It covers a much broader range of topics. It's not just necessarily geared towards someone who's a field technician. It's geared towards a lot of other different types of job roles as well. So that's sort of a high-level difference between the CCENT and the CCT. Another question, does Cisco make the CCNA harder every time they revise it? And Michael, you've got a good answer there. Not necessarily harder, just different. Yeah, Cisco tests typically every 3 to 4 years on average get an update. So the CCNA was updated back in 2016, I think. That was the last time they had an update for it. So you shouldn't expect an update for that for at least a good 2 or 3 years from now. But every time they do an update, a lot of times they will get rid of old stale technology and they'll replace it with newer technologies. So it's not necessarily harder stuff, it's just newer. It's sort of like, well, yeah, that pretty much explains that. Let's see here. Does the CCNA still cover frame relay? No, it doesn't. They took frame relay out of the CCNA during the last revision. However, if you get beyond the CCNA and you pursue your CCNP, that still has frame relay. However, the last time the CCNA and the CCNP is 3 exams right now, a route, switch, and T-shoot. So you have to pass all 3 exams to get your CCNP. The CCNP was last updated in 2014. So that's due for an update. I would suspect that probably sometime in 2018, next year, the CCNP will be updated, and I would expect that they will be removing frame relay from it at that time. I don't know for certain, but that's sort of the trend that things are going. But right now, if you take the CCNP, you still got to know frame relay. Don't have to know it for the CCNA. Let's see, what other questions do we have? Somebody says they've heard that you need to prepare for the CCNP if you want to approach the CCNA. I wouldn't suggest that. There's a lot of stuff at the CCNP level that you're just not going to be hit with at all in the CCNA, and you would be spending hundreds of hours studying stuff at the NP level that would be completely irrelevant and inapplicable to you when you go to take your CCNA exam. So I would not worry about studying for the CCNP until you've got your CCNA. Like I said, Todd I'm not sure if he pronounces his last name Lamel or Lamel. I just call him Lamel. But Todd's books are really good. I've heard a lot of good praise about that. Okay. I can't speak to the Cybex book because it's been ages since I've looked at any of the Cybex books, so I can't speak to whether or not they are good resources or not. All right, so hold on, folks. It's about 2,000 degrees here in this room, so I need to turn on a fan. All right. And yeah, right now, MPLS, at the CCNA level, with regards to MPLS, they do want you to know, what the acronym means and some real high level stuff about MPLS, but no configuration, no troubleshooting. I mean, the level of MPLS covered in any of the books is literally probably about 2 paragraphs worth of stuff, and that's it. DMVPN, yes, same type of thing. With DMVPN, it's like, 4 or 5 paragraphs in the books. No configuration, no troubleshooting. They just want you to know, what protocols are involved in DPM. So DMVPN makes use of several protocols working together to accomplish an objective. And they just want you to know, what those protocols are and at a real high level how they work. Once again, I'd recommend using Cisco's official certification guidebooks so you get the appropriate level of depth for DMVPN. And yep, PPP over Ethernet is in there. Someone's asking, I think I've seen this here a couple times, is there an I&E giveaway someday? I'll tell you what, a couple ways you can answer that question. Number one, let's go to I&E's website. If you go to ine.com, when we do have giveaways, frequently they're at the top of our main page. CCNA Complete Bundle for just $4.99. There might be something else under here too. Let's see here. So it looks like right now that's what we're doing is the CCNA bundle. But what I would recommend is right here, see where it says be in the know? And you can type in your email address. That'll get you on I&E's email list. And when we do have giveaways, you'll be the first one to know. You'll get an email about it. Otherwise, you'll just have to check our website, like every 3 or 4 days and look at the top of it to see if we're having a giveaway or not. We just finished one a couple of days ago. Okay, so let's go on to the next section here, which is studying tips. So in this section here, I'm going to try to give you some ideas as far as ways that you can make your studying and your time as efficient and useful as possible. If you're spending 2 to 3 hours a day during the weekdays and 4 to 6 hours a day during the weekend, you want that time to be effective. You want to walk away at the end of that knowing some stuff. So what are some various resources you have available to you to make that work? All right, so clearly, number one, videos, books, and online documents. That's going to be your first section or tools that you're going to use. And I think I've already pretty much exhausted that. Videos, books, and online documents. There's really nothing else to show you there about that. Practice exams. Yes, practice, practice, practice. So if you can, select a book that has practice exams in it. Also, I want to show you the practice exams that we here at I&E have, just so you can get a feel for that. So once again, I'm going to go to the members dashboard. All Access Pass, Cisco, CCNA, routing and switching. Okay, and you'll see that we have here, here is a practice exam we've got here. And I'm pretty sure, let me check one other thing. ICND 1, let's see. CCNA, CCNP switch practice exam. Yeah, we don't care about that. CCNP route. All right, well, we'll just go with this. So let's go ahead and click on the practice exam. Okay. And this exam, I tried to structure it in a way that would be as close to your real CCNA exam experience as possible. That being the case, it is timed. You are given about the same level of questions. So in this particular case, you're going to be given 60 multiple choice questions based on the 200-120 exam blueprint. And there is a wider pool of questions. You will be given 1 hour and 30 minutes to complete it, so 90 minutes. And that's just like when you take the real CCNA. You have 90 minutes total to complete that exam. And each time you take it, you should get a brand new set of questions. So let's go ahead and click it right here. All right, begin practice. Let's do it. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but I'm just going to randomly select some questions. So let's say, all right, select 2 answers. All right, so we'll do that one and that one. I'm not even reading these right now. Select the best answer. All right, that one looks nice. We'll just do a couple more. Select 2 answers. Okay. You see the questions have got show output sometimes you have to select. Let's just do one more. Select the best answer. Okay. So this one's here is testing your knowledge of Cisco iOS commands, right? You have to select the answer that's got the right command set in it. Submit. I say, okay, I'm done. You know, I've done 5 questions. I have to leave here in about 30 seconds for my meeting. I just want to see how I did. So end and submit for grading. Now before that, you'll notice here in the upper left-hand corner, it does have the timer. So you can have that nice stressful experience about knowing how much time is left. Unlike the real CCNA exam, you can actually pause this thing if you need to walk away for some reason. And I'm going to submit this for grading. 0%. Oh, wow. Okay, I did really horribly. But if you click on any one of these, it'll show you the question, and it'll show you, okay, so these ones here are orange are the ones that I selected. The ones here in green are the correct ones. And many of these, not all of them, but many of these also have a video solution where you will see yours truly talking about the question and explaining why the correct answers were the correct answers. So that's a great resource for you, I think. But definitely you want to take as many practice exams as you possibly can, as many as you can get a hold of. Also, if you go to Cisco's website right here, there should be, let's see here, recommended training, additional resources. We don't care about that. But within the Learning at Cisco, let's just do this. Learning at Cisco. The Cisco Learning Network, that's what it's called. So a lot of the stuff on the Cisco Learning Network you do have to pay for, but they do have some nuggets of stuff in here that are free. And if you search around through this, the learning network at .cisco.com, I'm not going to spend a lot of time right here, but you should be able to find Access study material. All right, let's try that. You should be able to find some practice exams. Routing and switching, let's do ICND 1. All right, so a lot of this stuff here is free. There might be some small practice exams in here. I mean, here's one, but whenever there's a shopping cart next to it, that means that's something you have to pay for. But you should be able to find online lots of different resources for practice exams. Flashcards. I can't stress this enough. I think flashcards are a great resource. And when I say flashcards, I mean flashcards that you create yourself, not flashcards that you're purchasing or somebody else has created for you. I've said this a lot in my previous classes, and I'll keep on saying it till the day I die because I know it's true. It has been proven that the more of your senses, your 5 senses like, sight, sound, hearing, blah, 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 that you get involved in the learning process, the more you can take stuff and put it into your long-term memory. The easier it is to memorize stuff when you get more of your senses involved. So what does that have to do with this? Well, on the CCNA exams, there's a lot of stuff you have to memorize, right? There's a lot of numbers you have to memorize. When this happens, it triggers this, which triggers this. And I found that one of the best ways of memorizing stuff is to create my own flashcards. So I'll go to Office Depot or Staples or something, and I'll buy a set of like 3x5 blank flashcards. And then I will start creating my own questions. On the front, I'll write a question. When 2 routers come up at the same time, what's the criteria for deciding the OSPF designated router? I'll write that. And then I'll write the answer on the back. And by doing that, you're now getting your sense of sight as well as your sense of touch involved. 2 out of your 5 senses, which is putting that deeper into your brain, putting that deeper into your memory. So I will create these flashcards as I'm watching a video. If I'm watching a technical video, I will frequently pause the video and create a flashcard for myself on what I just learned. And then another great thing about flashcards is, like it says, you can get your friends and family involved. Now with flashcards, there are websites you can go to. For example, if I go to here, one that I've tried that I think works pretty well that's free is called Study Blue. So here at Study Blue, you can create online flashcards. You can log in. Oh, I don't have my credentials right here, but when you log in, you can create online flashcards for yourself, and then clearly, you can access them online. But I prefer to do it with the old-fashioned approach of real paper-based flashcards for a couple reasons. Number one, you're getting more of your senses involved, right? You're having to actually write it down. It takes longer, it takes more effort, which means you're more likely to memorize it. Secondly, real paper-based flashcards you can take with you everywhere. For example, when you're driving, right? When you pull up to a red light, whip out a flashcard, look at it, answer it, and then keep going when the light turns green, right? When you're at dinner, with your spouse or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, you can say, hey, can I give you 3 or 4 of my flashcards and you can test me on something? When you go into the bathroom, you get the idea, right? A paper-based flashcard you can take with you anywhere, and it's always available for you to study and quiz yourself on. Whereas online flashcards, not so much, right? You got to always have your smartphone, your tablet or something with you for those. And your friends and family will actually be thrilled to death to get involved in this process with you. If you say, hey, I'm studying for my CCNA, John, would you help me out here? John would love to take the opportunity to quiz you and embarrass you as you get the answers wrong. But hey, getting other people involved clearly is going to help you out as well. So I definitely recommend flashcards. And then you can, once you're done, you can sell your flashcards for like $50 million to your next friend who's studying for his or her CCNA. So you can make some profit off of it. Maybe, maybe not. Study with a group, if possible. So what does this look like? Well, and when I say with a group, it doesn't have to be a group that's physically present all in the same room, although that can help. But even if you find a group of people virtually online, you say, okay, every Thursday from 3 to 5 o'clock, we're going to meet virtually in a chat room or something, or we're going to join a conference call together. This is a great thing. Why? Well, you can say, okay, everybody, the next time we get together, we're going to be studying about EIGRP and how EIGRP works. So let's all agree to read these 10 pages together before we meet the next time. And now you know, okay, we're all reading the same material. And if I'm reading a page and I'm just like thoroughly confused, I can reach out to my group. Hey, Sally, hey, John, have you read page 5, the second paragraph yet? I'm totally lost. I don't understand what they're saying. And somebody from your group can help you out. You could say, hey, we're going to do this. One of the goals of our group is whenever we meet, part of the requirements of being in this CCNA study group is everybody has to come up with quiz questions. So every single time we meet, so let's say we meet next Thursday from 3 to 5, everybody in the group has to come up with 4 questions, 4 multiple choice questions that they're going to pose to the group. So that also incentivizes you to study, to keep on track, to come up with questions, to think about the questions that you can answer to other people, and you can look forward to the questions that they're going to have for you. That's another thing. Another aspect of a group. One of the best ways to learn something is to teach it to somebody else. Trust me, I have learned that myself. In a group environment, you could say, okay, next week, John, why don't you prepare a little 10-minute presentation on how EIGRP forms neighbor relationships? And Sally, why don't you prepare a 10-minute presentation on how EIGRP selects the best route when it receives multiple routes to the same location? And so now during the next week, you're putting a presentation together that you're going to give to the members of your group. Great learning opportunity for you. So there's lots of ways you can benefit from studying with a group, and I highly recommend it if at all possible. Refer back to old topics often. These Cisco books, or any book you get to study for your CCNA, are massively thick. We're talking about like 500 or 600 pages in each book. And it can become very easy that as you're like 2 months into it, you're really good with what you're studying right now, and then you look back at chapter 1, you say, I totally forgot everything I learned in chapters 1 through 6. That's why I say refer back to old topics often. And this is once again where your flashcards can come into play. Keep your flashcards separated, right? Create a set of flashcards for maybe a particular topic or maybe a particular chapter. And as you're studying something new, refer back to those old flashcards. Frequently go back to those old topics, keep them refreshed, keep them in your memory. Another great way of doing this is frequent lab practice. And these two actually go together. They're referring back to old topics and doing frequent lab practice. You want to layer this stuff together. For example, you start out and you know nothing about IP addressing. Okay, so probably one of the first things you're going to learn is what an IP address is, how it's structured, how it's used. Create some flashcards on that. Then you move along and you learn that IP addressing is very fundamental when it comes to routing relationships. That for 2 routers to talk to each other, to exchange information, they have to have IP addresses. And those IP addresses have to have a certain format and they have to match in a certain way. So now you can create a quiz question, a flashcard question for you that incorporates the old topic of IP addressing along with the new topic of the routing protocol that you're working with. So that's what I'm talking about layering stuff. Now, frequent lab practice also gets into this. People have asked me, although not a lot, is it theoretically possible that I could do nothing but watch videos, read books, never actually touch a Cisco router or a switch and pass my CCNA? And I will say, yes, it is theoretically possible, right? Because the CCNA is not a lab exam. It's an online exam you take on a computer. So theoretically, you could memorize the commands and the correct order in which they're supposed to be done based on what you read, based on videos. Now, is that a good approach? Absolutely not. If you're really good with memorization, like, you've got a photographic memory, that might work. But for most people, when it comes to actually memorizing the commands on the routers and switches to get something to work, to troubleshoot something, to verify something, just reading about it doesn't get it to stick here in the gray matter. You have to practice it. Also, we saw that when you take your CCNA, you're going to have questions, a lot of questions, that are testing you on your memorization of what command is appropriate to answer the question. And those commands might come in the form of a simulation, where you actually have to log on to something and type in a command and get it to work. But even the multiple choice questions, you'll get a lot of multiple choice questions. They'll say, what is the appropriate command? Select from the list below what the appropriate command is to accomplish this objective. So either way you slice it, you're going to have to know not only the theory of how things work and why things work, but you're going to have to know the commands to implement and troubleshoot stuff. And the best way to do that is to get hands-on lab practice. So how do you do that? There's a lot of ways you can accomplish this, depending on how much money you want to spend and what's important to you. So let's talk about 3 basic ways you can get hands-on lab practice. So number 1, we could say build your own racks. In other words, go to some Cisco partner, some Cisco vendor, maybe go to eBay and buy your own switches, buy your own routers, buy your own cables, and in the comfort of your own home or apartment, build your own CCNA rack and practice it. Now, if you're going to do that, I would say at a minimum, you should have 3 routers and 2 switches. And when purchasing your switches, switches come in sort of 2 overall types. There are what we call just layer 2 switches, and they're what we call multi-layer switches. If at all possible, it might be a little bit more expensive, but you want your switches to be multi-layer switches, which means they're capable of routing as well as switching. And why is that? Because if you get multi-layer switches, now when you come up with your routing labs, you actually have 5 devices that can do routing. You see, if I just had layer 2 switches and 3 routers, I'd be kind of limited on what kind of labs I could do that are routing labs, because I only have 3 devices to work with. But if I could take my switches and essentially turn them into routers, now I've got a lot more flexibility. So I would say that's the minimum to create your own lab. Now there are pros and cons with that. Clearly one of the pros is that that lab is always available to you. Night or day, 7 days a week, it's always right there. Even if you lose your internet connectivity, it's right there. It's not dependent upon outside connectivity whatsoever. Some other benefits to that. There are definitely some things you can learn about Cisco equipment by seeing it and touching it that you couldn't learn in any other way. For example, the practicality of plugging in cables, what the end of an RJ45 cable looks like and how easy it is to snap off that end, what the lights look like when you turn on a device or you plug in a cable, what the LEDs look like, what is green, flashing green, what's flashing red, what's flashing orange look like, why are those lights there? How do you plug in and out a module and what happens when you do that? All sorts of things, knowledge that you can get only if you're physically in front of and able to touch a device. The downsides of building your own rack. It can be a little costly, although to be honest with you, used Cisco gear is pretty cheap, especially when you're just buying stuff for a CCNA rack, just basic routers and switches. You can probably put this together for less than $500 easily. So that's not so much of a factor, but this stuff sucks up a lot of electricity. When you have it turned on, expect your electrical bill to go way up. So that's a downside. It also pumps out a lot of heat. So whatever room you're in, better have good ventilation because you're going to be hot in there. Be prepared to do your labs in your swimming suit because you're going to be bathed in sweat. This stuff really pumps out a lot of heat. Be aware of that. If you got little kids going around, they might topple the gear over or stick their finger inside of a port and fry their little brains. You don't want that to happen. So there's security stuff you have to think about as well. So pros and cons to it. So that's one option. Option number 2 would be to use emulators, or simulators. What is that and what's the difference between the two? So what we're talking about here is using software on your laptop that looks and feels like Cisco gear, to where you don't actually have to buy the stuff. You can do it all in the confines of your laptop or your PC. What's the difference between an emulator and a simulator? Well, let me give you some examples. Let's start with a simulator. So a free simulator, which for the CCNA I think is perfect, is something called Packet Tracer. You pull up this here. So if you go to Google and you type in Cisco Packet Tracer download, you'll see right here, Cisco Packet Tracer Network Academy. So you can click on that. If you sign up for the Network Academy, now this doesn't mean you actually have to go to a building and participate in classes. Just you can log in, you can sign up remotely. So enroll to download Packet Tracer. Just put in some of your credentials here, like your email address, your blood type, your social security number, maybe not all that stuff, but just sign up for Packet Tracer. It's for the Network Academy. It's free. Don't have to submit a credit card or anything. And once you sign up, you get Cisco's Packet Tracer, which is free. Now, I think I have a copy of Packet Tracer here on my laptop. Yes, so let me see if I can move this over here. Come on, are you going to go in the middle? Why do you keep going up there? All right, so anyway, when you download Packet Tracer, this is the little icon that you'll see. And if you double click on that, Cisco Packet Tracer will open up. And it's opening up here. There we go. And so from here, you can build networking topologies. So for example, let's just put a couple of routers in here. And let's put in maybe a generic laptop. And let's put in a switch. And then you can connect these guys up straight through from here, there to there. And I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you can see you can build a topology. And then once you've built the topology, click on device, click on command line, and now you're basically in that device. And you can learn about the Cisco command line that way. And this is a fantastic way to learn about the Cisco iOS command line. Now, why do we call it a simulator? Cisco routers and switches, at least at the CCNA level, what they want you to know is that just like your laptop runs software, right? Your laptop is like running Windows, or if you're in a Mac device, it's running iOS, but it's running some sort of operating system. Cisco routers and switches have their own operating system, which is called iOS. It stands for the Internetworking Operating System. It came out long before Apple had their iOS. So Cisco iOS is the operating system, and that's what we see right here. And Cisco iOS is a command line operating system. It's not graphical. You have to type in commands to get the router switch to do what it's going to do. So what does that have to do with this? A simulator is software that was built to look and feel like Cisco iOS, but it's not real Cisco iOS. So it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that Cisco iOS has. When you issue commands, it might not exactly look and feel like Cisco iOS. Some of the stuff that happens might not be exactly what you would see in a router or switch. So it's simulating Cisco software. Now, for the purposes of the CCNA, this is great. Packet Tracer is really all you would ever need for your CCNA preparation. Anything you need to know for routing and switching, it's here, it's free, it's awesome. Now, if you get your CCNA and decide to pursue on to the CCNP level, that's where this really sort of breaks down. The CCNP level, the next level up, has a lot of features and stuff that Packet Tracer doesn't support. So this doesn't really work well beyond that. But for the CCNA, awesome. I would definitely recommend it. So that's why I call a simulator. So what is this other thing mentioned called an emulator? Well, an emulator, and a free emulator that you can use, is something called GNS3. So if you go to Google and you type in GNS3, it'll take you to their website. And you can download GNS3 for free. Now you'll need to once again sign up on their website, which is free, and then you can download GNS3. And then once you download that, you'll get an icon that looks like this. This cute little lizard right here. And then when we start GNS3, I'll show you what that looks like. So here's what GNS3 looks like when you first start it up. So what's the difference with this? Well, Packet Tracer, the simulator, works all by itself. It's a standalone product. It doesn't have any other requirements. GNS3 actually requires that you have real Cisco iOS software. It works with software. Now this is why we call it an emulator. Normally, Cisco iOS software expects to be loaded and operating in a real Cisco router or a real Cisco switch, a physical router or switch. What the developers at GNS3 did is they did something real interesting. They said, okay, let's develop some software that can work on a laptop or a PC. We'll load Cisco iOS software into it, and when the software boots up, your laptop or PC will be emulating a router. The Cisco iOS software will think it's operating within a real router or real switch, but in reality, it's not. It's operating in your laptop, in your PC, which is emulating or pretending to be a router or a switch. So the benefit of an emulator is that you're actually using real Cisco iOS software. Whatever commands are in Cisco iOS, they're here. So from a CCNA perspective, there's pros and cons to this. You know, clearly one of the cons is that you need to get real Cisco iOS software, and it might be a challenge to find the real software that can run with this. Clearly, if you've actually purchased Cisco gear or you work for a company that has purchased Cisco gear, you might be able to get your hands on a software image that can work with GNS3. Otherwise, it might be a little challenging. The second con to this, GNS3 is great for routing. As a matter of fact, you can use this all the way up to the CCIE level for any routing labs that you might want to do. It's real Cisco iOS router software. For switching, not so much. For the stuff you have to learn for switches, there's a lot of limitations in GNS3 that, quite frankly, at Packet Tracer you'd be able to do that you can't do in GNS3. So from a CCNA level, I still think it'd be better to go to Packet Tracer than GNS3, if only for the reason that, number one, Packet Tracer does not have any other software dependencies, where this does. This requires real Cisco iOS software. And Packet Tracer, anything you need to know at the CCNA level for routing or switching, it's in there. GNS3, routing, yes. Switching, not so much. But when you get to up to the CCNP level, that's where Packet Tracer falls by the wayside, and this becomes really good for routing. And then maybe you'll just want to purchase like 2 or 3 real switches and connect it up to your laptop and have GNS3 work through those physical switches. So that's an emulator. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that. Okay, so I mentioned that I said option number 1 was to purchase your own lab gear. Option number 2 was to use a simulator or an emulator. Or there's a third option, which is to rent time on somebody else's gear. And this is what I&E specializes in. Let me show you. So once again, if you go to your members dashboard, I'm going to expand on this here. You'll see up at the top there's a section that says rack rentals right there. If you click on that, you'll see that I&E we have a data center in Nevada that has lots of different types of racks that you can rent time on. For the purposes of this course, we're going to take a look at the CCNA, CCNP routing and switching rack. Now, if you click on Rack Rental Guide, right here you'll see this rack contains 4 physical routers and 3 physical switches. They have a bunch of LAN connections. You can also practice WAN topologies because there's back-to-back serial. There's frame relay connections, although frame relay isn't part of the CCNA anymore, but is part of the CCNP. And with this rack, you can practice anything you would need at the CCNA level, from routing to switching. So let me go back here. Now you rent time on all these racks based on tokens. So step number 1 would be to purchase some tokens. I believe the least amount of tokens you can purchase are 100, and the retail price of a token is $1. So 100 tokens equals $100. But INE has sales all the time on tokens. So let's say you start out by purchasing 100 tokens. All right? You can see here there are CCNA racks go for 3 tokens per hour. So 100 tokens will get you roughly, what, 33 hours on this rack? That's actually quite a bit for 100 tokens. So now that you've got your 100 tokens, you say, okay, maybe what I want to do is I want to spend 3 hours on this rack this weekend, which will cost me basically $10 to do that. So you click on schedule. So this weekend, see, here's Wednesday the 8th, so 9th, so we're talking about November 11th. So I'm going to click on November 11th, and I want to start at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I want to go until November 11th until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 hours. Done. Now search. And you'll see that that time slot is available, and I could click on book. And then it will reserve a rack for me, and then you will get the information. So you'll get an email that says, okay, on this time slot, you have this rack available. It'll give you your username and your password. And then once the time slot is available, you can log into it. So this is what you'll see. Rack rentals. So for example, you can see here that I have a rack available. It's pretty much mine all the time, and I use these for lab demonstrations. When I'm doing a boot camp, like a CCNA or CCNP boot camp, this is the rack I use to do all my labs and show people how to do it. So if you rent time on a rack, you'll see. It'll say here, actually let's delete this. You can go to upcoming rentals. I don't think anything's going to show up for me because I don't think I have any upcoming rentals. Yeah, nothing comes up here. But if you do have upcoming rentals and you click on that, you would see it says, okay, here's your rack. And don't worry, I'm going to change this as soon as this course is done. But my particular rack, this is the username I would use. This is the password I would use. So I would telnet to that rack. Or I can click on Control Panel, and I can get into the rack this way. It'll show up in just 1 second. There we go. So there's all my devices. There's my connections. And I can get in there. And the beauty of this is that, number one, I don't have to buy my own gear. I don't have to worry about my electrical costs. I don't have to worry about the heat that this gear is coming up with. Certainly the cost involved of purchasing the gear and putting it together. This stuff is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I can just pick a time slot. And the CCNA gear is pretty much available all the time. So you don't have to book something days or weeks in advance. Hey, you know what? If I want to practice right now, for example, let's go back to rack rentals. It's lunchtime, and I want to use the next hour to practice. Right here, if I click on CCNA, schedule, you can see right now I could book the next 3 hours for 9 tokens. It's available immediately. So it's available anytime that I want to use this. Another good thing about these racks is not only their 24/7 availability, but another thing that I&E has, if I go back to the members dashboard, is we have labs that we've created for you that you can use to practice, and they're called workbooks. So right here, if I click on the section right there where it says workbooks, if I click on that, now if I have an all access pass, I have lots of workbooks available to me, and you can see this right here. But we have, for example, CCNA ICND 1 lab workbook. If I click on that, click on one of the sections right here, it talks about, how do I install a Telnet client? Well, let's forget about that. Let's go to one of the sections that actually has, how about IP routing? Debugging RIP version 2. All right, so this particular section right here, and so if you're using, so all of these workbooks are based on the assumption that you are using I&E's racks for rack rentals. So from the rack rentals section, so for example, it says right here, on the rack rentals section, you would download this pre-config template called CCNA v3 ICND Workbook Routing 2. So if I went to that, if I went to the rack rentals section, let's just go to my members dashboard again. Rack rentals. Log into my rack. And then once I'm logged into my rack, you can see here, if I do a search on ICND 1, these are configurations that are pre-configured to go along with the workbook. So for example, if I select that one and I hit load config, after a few minutes, it will load this topology. And all my IP addresses and all my interfaces will be pre-configured and ready to go. And then I go through the tasks. The tasks say, configure this, do this. So I try that out, I try to get to work. And then when I think I've got it working, under configuration, I can click on where it says click to expand. And it shows me, here's the commands you should have typed in. Here's some messages you could have seen. It explains, why are you seeing this? Why are you seeing what you're seeing? And then I can proceed on to the next task once I've got this one done. So this is another benefit of using I&E's rack rentals, is that these workbooks go hand in hand with it. So that's what I meant by frequent lab practice. Another good thing of doing lab practice, and this doesn't matter whether you're using Packet Tracer or GNS3 or I&E's racks, or you have your own racks. You should create your own labs. Don't just rely on I&E's workbooks. As you're reading something, as you're watching a video, you should be thinking to yourself, okay, how can I do this myself? This thing I'm reading about, this video I'm watching, how can I recreate this protocol, this feature on my rack? So you should have a piece of paper in front of you, and you should be thinking about, okay, this particular video is teaching me about how to do access lists. Number one, what's the minimum quantity of equipment I would need to practice this feature? Maybe you can practice a feature with just one router, or just one router and one switch, but what's the minimum topology I could create to practice this? And draw out a topology. Okay, if I've got a router connected to a switch, that's really all I need. Number two, write down your objective. Okay, well, I'm doing an access list lab, so I want my objective to be, I want to use an access list to control this router logging into this switch. Okay, that'll be my objective. And write down, okay, what am I going to do? Well, on this topology, I'm going to have these IP addresses, that's what I'm going to come up with, and I'm going to try to do this. So by the time you log into your rack, or you log into Packet Tracer, or you log into I&E's racks, you've got a lab that you've built yourself to your own custom specifications, and you practice, can I make it work? Can I do what I just saw in the video? Can I do what I just read about in the book? So you're definitely going to lab this stuff up over and over and over again. And the last study tip I would recommend is get familiar with Wireshark. Wireshark is another free software that you can download. In case you're not familiar with it, let me show you. Actually, forget about Google. Just go to wireshark.org. And you can download the latest version of Wireshark. And then once you download it, let me show you what it's going to look like. Now, I don't know if I'm using the most, I don't think I'm using necessarily, yeah, I'm not. I'm not using the most recent available, but that's okay. Remind me later. So Wireshark is a tool where you can actually see all of the data that's coming in or going off the network from your laptop's perspective. So for example, I'm connected via Wi-Fi. I selected my Wi-Fi NIC card. So right now I'm just capturing all the Wi-Fi frames that my Wi-Fi NIC is seeing. And what's this useful for? Well, for example, one of the things you're going to study during the course of the CCNA is something called the Transmission Control Protocol, TCP. Well, here I've captured a TCP segment, and I can open it up, and I can see with my own eyes, oh, there's the source port, there's the destination port, port number 443. That is secure HTTP. You can see, oh, there's the sequence number, there's the acknowledgement number. You can see the flags field. Basically, it goes above and beyond just seeing stuff in a book or seeing stuff demonstrated in a video. With Wireshark, you can actually see for yourself all the information that your laptop is sending and receiving off the network. And it really brings stuff into visual focus that you wouldn't normally be able to see. So I would definitely recommend downloading and just playing around with Wireshark. It's a great tool. So that concludes this section here on study tips. Let me just take a moment here to see if there's any Q&A I can answer. That was a pretty lengthy section. All right, so the latest question here, are the INE workbook templates downloadable to be imported into other simulation apps like Packet Tracer? In order to get access to the templates, let me see here. Well, in order to get access to the templates, you have to rent time on our racks. But here's the thing. Let me show you something. You don't necessarily have to rent hundreds of hours of time. If I went to now, let me take a step back here. In order to rent any time on our racks, you have to purchase a minimum of 100 tokens. There's really no way around that. So let's say you do that. You buy your 100 tokens, and then here, let's say you rent an hour on the rack. Once you've rented any time on the rack, once it's your hour on the rack, then from here, you can select these workbook configs, and here's what you would do differently. Instead of loading the config, so what loading the config does, actually let me put this on here, is actually loads it onto your devices. Instead, what you would want to do is do where it says download config. See, with download config, when you select a template, any template from anything you see in here, when you do download config, it downloads it as a zip file. It downloads all of the stuff. So for example, click here to download the rack configuration. Okay. Save. Finish downloading. And now these are text files of all of the devices that went with that particular configuration. I don't even know what I selected, IPv6 or something. But if I open this up, in, for example, Word, now I've got it. So if I rent an hour on this equipment, I could use that hour to just download all these templates, just select one template after the other. Okay, that was HSRP. Now I'm going to go to the DHCP template, download. Go to the routing template, download. And so you can download all the templates, and now you've got text files of all of them. And then you could presumably use those text files to upload onto GNS3 or upload into Packet Tracer. Now here's the thing though. Remember that these templates were developed based on the assumption that you are using INE's racks. So if you're using GNS3 or Packet Tracer or Cisco's Viral or something like that, there's going to be some differences. For example, router 1 on our rack has two interfaces, Fast Ethernet 00 and Fast Ethernet 01. If you're doing this on a simulator or an emulator, you might have different interface numbering like Fast Ethernet 11 and Fast Ethernet 10 or something like that. So you might have to make some minor tweaks to those configuration text files so that they will work in whatever it is that you're using. But that's one way you can get them. Let's see here. I'm not going to use this forum to actually answer technical questions like, which is better, OSPF or EIGRP. Because this particular session is geared towards people who are thinking about the CCNA, they want to know what to expect, they want to know how to prepare, I'm going to answer questions that are more geared towards that level. There's not really a voucher you can purchase for retaking the exam. Statistics say that chances are highly likely you will fail the first time you take any Cisco exam. That's just what statistics say, that between 60 and 70% of people do not pass on the first try. And unfortunately, the way Cisco has it is it's always the exact same cost. So whether you take it 2 times or whether you take it 6 times, the ICND1 exam is always going to be $165. There's no discounted fee for retakes. So that's just Cisco's policy on that. Let's see if there's any other questions here that I can help with. Is there a YouTube channel with the complete CCNP routing and switching? Not from INE. So INE, a lot of times when we come out with a course like a CCNP routing and switching course or a CCIE routing and switching course, we will put 1 or 2 or 3 of the videos on YouTube so you can get a taste for it, so you can see how the presenter presents the material. But ultimately, you have to purchase the course. Either purchase it as a standalone course or purchase it as an all-access pass, which gives you availability to all of INE's videos. RIP version 2 is still on the exam, so even though not a lot of people use it, you still are going to be tested on it. Let's see, any other questions here? Somebody asked the question, how far should one be able to do the math related to subnetting in order to pass the CCNA exam? And I see Michael answered the question. Michael, I think your answer was pretty good there. Get comfortable with binary in general. Yep, you should be comfortable with binary and hexadecimal in general. Hexadecimal will be helpful for you when you're doing things like spanning tree questions or questions related to MAC addresses. So you'll need to know that. Let's see here. Somebody says they have the full access pass. Should they study the 60-something hour path you guys have, or go the 220-hour plus path for your CCNA? This is what I would recommend, especially if you have an all-access pass. If you have an I&E all-access pass, that means you have access to all of our videos, everything we've got. So this is what I would recommend. Starting from your members dashboard, once again, I'm assuming you're preparing for the CCNA. I would go here to Cisco, CCNA, routing and switching. Let me make this full screen here. And I'm going to assume that you're going to take the separate exams, so ICND 1, and then when you pass that, you're going to take the ICND 2. So I would start by looking right here under CCNA CCENT ICND 1 Technologies. So you'll see that this is roughly 22.5 hours of material. I'd recommend that you go through all of these videos, frequently pausing and making a lot of flashcards for yourself. Once you've gone through those videos, I would also recommend that as you go through each video, once you're done with a video, for example, on static routing, so you watch those 14 minutes of that video. At that point, I'd recommend going to Cisco's certification guide and read the section on static routes. I would recommend that you Google the concept of static routes, creating flashcards, flashcards, flashcards before you move on to the next video. Once you've done all 22.5 hours of videos and you've also read stuff online, then you could go back and watch some of these specialty videos. For example, Cisco, CCNA, routing and switching. What I mean by specialty videos are, for example, let's see here, like the Candidate's Guide to OSPF, a video series just on OSPF, a video series just on spanning tree, another video series just on EIGRP. But I would start by completing an entire video series on the ICND 1 before you branch off into this stuff or you branch off into this stuff. That would be my recommendation. I do not think Packet Tracer is too basic for the CCNA. I think Packet Tracer is a perfectly appropriate, perfect level for CCNA. So Michael, the thing you're talking about the idle CPU and your own iOS image, that's for GNS3. You don't need that for Packet Tracer. Packet Tracer does not require all those extra things. Just download the software and you're off and running. Let's see. Yeah, Michael's got a great point. Take notes the old-fashioned way. Pen, paper, pencil, and then type up all your notes. I know it sounds like a hassle, but writing your notes down, once again, it gets that stuff into long-term memory a lot better than typing your notes as you're going along. I know it's a hassle, but it just works when it comes to learning theory. Unfortunately, when it comes to taking an exam in a different language, and I understand that for a lot of you guys, French might be your mother language, your mother tongue, Russian might be your mother tongue, but as we saw, and I'm going to go back to this here, I think when we saw that when it comes to registering for the CCNA, I believe you've only got 3 options. I think there was English, Japanese, and Arabic. I think those were the only 3 options for actually taking the exam. I don't believe Cisco currently has a Russian or a French version of, or a Portuguese version of the CCNA. You just have to take it in those 3 languages. All right, so I'm going to tell you what, I still got a little bit more to go, but we've been going for a couple of hours now, and I don't know about you, but I need a break. So let's go ahead and take a short break, and let's take a break for like 15 minutes. That'll give us a chance to eat something possibly, and then 15 minutes I'm going to come back, and we will wrap up with whatever sections we have not done yet. So I will see you guys in about 15 minutes. Hello, my name is Keith Bogart, and I'm one of the instructors here at I&E. And if you're watching this video, it's most likely because you're considering attending our CCNA Routing and Switching Bootcamp. But you may have some questions about it, and I'm here to hopefully answer those questions. So let's get started. Probably one of the most important questions is, why should you attend I&E's CCNA Routing and Switching Bootcamp? One of the best reasons I can give you is dedicated learning. When you're doing your own self-study, there's all kinds of things that can distract you, as you well know. But when you're sitting in our classroom, in our boot camp, you'll have 5 to 7 days of dedicated learning for these routing and switching technologies. Nothing will be available to distract you. You'll be heads down in learning these protocols. So what else is a benefit? You'll also get instant answers to your questions. Once again, when you're doing your self-study and you get confused or stuck, where do you go to get an answer to your question? Most likely you're turning to some kind of online community or forum where you might have to wait hours or days to get answers to your questions. And hopefully those answers are clear and not ambiguous. When you're sitting in one of our boot camps, you have a knowledgeable instructor dedicated to you right there. You can ask any question at any time. As a matter of fact, the instructor will encourage that to make sure that you're getting the most out of your boot camp experience. Another benefit of attending our boot camps is instructor-assisted labs. You know that as you're pursuing your CCNA certification, you need to have hands-on lab time. There's no better way to learn the Cisco iOS command line and memorize the commands and what you should expect via various show and debugging output. But if you're doing labs on your own, where do you start? What feature is important? What features should you ignore? When you're in one of our boot camps, all those questions are answered for you. The bootcamp labs are structured to highlight the most relevant features and protocols that you're most likely to see when achieving your CCNA certification exam. Also, you'll have the instructor right there, so if you get stuck during a lab, that instructor can help walk you through it and answer any questions that you might have. And of course, it goes without saying that sitting in a bootcamp experience, you'll have lots of interactivity. Not only will you be able to engage with the instructor, you'll have other students around you who have varying degrees of networking experience, who you can bounce ideas off of, and who can give you some ideas as to how this stuff is used in the real world in their own networks. So what can you expect by attending one of our boot camps? Well, certainly you can expect long days. There is a reason why we call these boot camps. The Cisco CCNA covers a lot of material, and so in order to learn this stuff, we're going to have long, grueling days, so be prepared for that. Be prepared to be dedicated to this experience, should you hopefully choose to go. You'll have lectures and lab demonstrations. The instructor's not just going to sit up there for 8 or 10 hours hitting you with one PowerPoint after the other. In order to reinforce the material, you're going to have frequent whiteboarding, frequent verbal explanations of how this stuff is used in the real world, and lab demonstrations, so you can actually see how to configure, monitor, and troubleshoot this on real equipment. You'll also have equipment of your own, so if you choose to do so, you can follow along with the instructor's lab demonstrations. And you'll have do-it-yourself labs. Now, this is the type of lab or term I've coined that means once the instructor has taught you a particular topic, that person might put some lab objectives up on a slide or bullet point. Real high-level objectives. Configure this protocol. Make it talk this way with this device. And the idea is you have a certain amount of time to try to make it work on your own, to see if you've actually learned the material and can incorporate it into your own lab. And then, of course, at the end of the time, the instructor will go through that lab and show you how to complete it. You can also expect verbal quizzing during the lab. This is one of many tools the instructor has to do testing for understanding. The instructor will frequently ask individuals within the class questions pertaining to what has just been taught, or maybe things that were taught hours or days before, just to make sure that you're actually retaining the knowledge. So what are some of our prerequisites to attend a CCNA bootcamp? This bootcamp is not designed for someone who has no networking experience at all. We do expect that you will have done some self-study prior to attending this bootcamp to get the most out of this experience. The ideal candidate, before attending our CCNA Routing and Switching Bootcamp, will have spent a minimum of 2 to 3 months in their own self-studies. Now, in order to help guide you further, if you go to streaming.ine.com, our website, and from there, click on Cisco, CCENT, you'll see that the very first topic is called Operation of IP Data Networks. That consists of about 3 hours of videos that fall under that general umbrella. So ideally, you would watch those 3 hours before attending our bootcamp, or get a similar level of knowledge via your own self-studies of reading, white papers, or wherever you go to do your self-studies. So with that, hopefully I've answered your questions, I've whetted your appetite to attend our bootcamp, and I will see you there.
You know, I think that when I first started that there was, I had a perception that I knew a lot about the core protocols. And now, I realized I didn't when I first started, and this has really filled in those gaps. Just getting in there, labbing the stuff, seeing the problems, correcting the problems.
I've never seen anything out there like this, and I've been to multiple Cisco courses for my CCNP, CCNA, but this you actually get to see the technology work, so it kind of helps stick it in your brain.
Our sessions are very interactive, always available to answer any questions during the session or offline.
He gives you the right mentality you need to approach any problem or troubleshoot or, answer a question on the test.
It's helped me a lot, even stuff that's not even for the CCIE, I had the all access pass, just the knowledge that you get from them, not only this is how you configure it, but they actually show you in the video, this is how it works. And that's what you need. You can't just read a document and be like, well, this is the configuration. So hopefully it works, because sometimes it doesn't work.
I wish that I'd start off with material just like this, because I would have understood right off the bat what the theory is and what it's actually doing in the command line.
It's definitely more advanced. I think it's explained in a better way, better analogies. I think it's tougher, which is good. I took one that was earlier, and it was easier, you know what I mean? So it gave me this false confidence. And so now you're getting into this stuff and you see wow, this is a little bit more advanced. So, I want to do some more of this stuff, and now I'm starting to feel way more comfortable.
A few of the weak spots that I had, I'm able to get over those things and understand those things better.
It's easy to study for a test and just study exactly what you need to know, but in this class we've gone kind of above and beyond, and he showed us things that can actually apply in real world, and some things that may not be applicable to the exam, but are good things to know, especially when troubleshooting. And
I definitely recommend it. I've been recommending it. Just using the materials, now going to the camp, I'd recommend it all day long. It's a completely different learning experience.
All right, great everyone. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the break. Let's see, where were we? So this next section I call personal observations, which is my own personal observations of the last few times I've taken the test that I can share with you, some of the specifics. All right, so some things here. First of all, if we go back to Cisco's site, Cisco CCNA, I want to point out a couple things. All right, let's go down to, first of all, the ICND-1 and the ICND-2. You point out just some relevant things here. I'm going to expand this. Okay, so notice that it says you're going to be given 45 to 55 questions. That's how many you can expect. And like I mentioned earlier, you're going to be having an hour and a half. You'll have 90 minutes to complete that. Now that's when you take the two separate exams, the ICND-1 and the ICND-2. I believe the ICND-2 has the exact same information. Let's just check it. 45 to 50 questions in 90 minutes. ICND-2, same thing, 45 to 55 questions in 90 minutes. Now, if you take the path of choosing the composite exam, that's a little bit different. Notice here, you're still given 45 to 50 minutes. You still have the same amount of time. I'm sorry, you're still given 90 minutes, the same amount of time, but you're given more questions. Instead of 45 to 55, you're being asked to do 60 to 70. So the composite exam is a little tougher from that respect, that you'll have more questions in the exact same amount of time. So be aware of that. So what did I see? Well, last time I took the exam, I took this one right here, that's 200-125. Okay. So I got 64 questions. That's how many I got. And it was 90 minutes, as it always is. As far as scoring is concerned, a perfect score, absolutely perfect, is 1,000. And you have to have at least 810 to pass. And you'll know, like I said, as soon as you hit enter on that last question and submit the score for grading, the test for grading, you'll know exactly what your score was. I mentioned as far as simulations are concerned, I only got one, and I got one testlet. And I want to mention this, brain dump in your car. What's that referring to? If you are like most people, then you will probably fail the test the first time you take it, whether it be the ICND-1 or the ICND-2. Here's an approach I recommend. As you're taking the exam, if you come across, I should say when you come across a question that stumps you, you're like, man, I have no idea what this is, I'm going to have to guess. Before you guess, on that laminated sheet of paper there, make a little note to yourself, something that'll help you to remember that question. Like maybe OSPF dead timer, write that down. Or, just something to help, 3 or 4 words to help you remember the question. Then, before you hit submit, actually you can go ahead, submit the exam, you're done with it. But before you leave the room, before you stand up and go get your report, look at that laminated sheet of paper and take a few minutes trying to memorize what you wrote down. The objective is, as you walk out of that exam center, as much as possible, you want to try to memorize the questions that you know you did badly on. The questions that you had to guess, the questions you were a little uncertain about. Try to remember those. Now you're going to walk to your car, you're going to walk to the bus or whatever it is you're walking to. Before you start your car and you drive home, or you start your car and you drive to the office, back to work, bring up, ideally, your smartphone, your tablet, something that will allow you to do a voice recording of yourself. and sit back with your smartphone or tablet in front of your face and start just verbally talking to yourself about the questions that you know you messed up on. Say, okay, there was a question there on BGP neighbor relationship. I did not understand that one. There was a question there on the OSPF dead timer. I had to guess. There was a question there on the EIGRP hello timer, and I think it was either 5 seconds or 10 seconds, but I don't remember. So just go through that. And then eventually you'll be able to like, okay, I think that's it. I think that covers everything I struggle with. That's it. Hit end. End your recording. Now, drive back home. Drive back to the office. And when you have a chance, sit down, play the recording back to yourself, and type up notes based on your recording. Now you'll have a study guide for yourself. Now you'll have a study guide on the areas that you know you did poorly on, that you struggled with. I'll tell you, if you wait until you get home, if you wait until you get back to the office before you sit down and you try to do that, you will have forgotten a lot of that stuff. Do it while your mind is fresh, right after you've walked out of the testing center, before anything else distracts you, because a lot of those, that is very priceless information, those questions you did not do well on. And you want to log that, you want to notate that before it leaves your memory. So do it immediately. So that's all I have on the personal observation section. Let me take a quick moment here to see if there's any unanswered Q&A. Question here from Juan. It's not a silly question at all. It's a very good question. Do testing centers allow the use of pencil and paper, to do the math and take notes? No, they do not. They do not allow you to take pencil and paper in there. Like I mentioned, all they allow you to take in is they're going to give you a laminated card about so big. They're going to give you some dry erase markers and a dry erase eraser. That's it. That's all you have to take your notes on and to do your math with. Let's see what other questions we have here. While I'm looking through here, if you have any unanswered questions, feel free to post them now. Is spanning tree covered in the CCNA? Absolutely. Spanning tree is a topic that you'll find in the ICND 2 exam. That's where they go into spanning tree. And they'll talk about, because if you start researching spanning tree, you'll learn that there's more than one kind of spanning tree. The CCNA is primarily going to emphasize 802.1d, which was the original spanning tree, and a little bit of rapid spanning tree, but primarily 802.1d. All right, I don't see any other questions coming in. So let's go to the next section. Common pitfalls. So this section I'm going to talk about what are some things that a lot of times happen to people while they're studying that derail them, that cause them to lose focus, that cause them to study twice as long as they normally would have to, and how can you avoid those things? So number one, failing to create or adhere to a dedicated schedule. This is really important. If you're like me, you can start out your day with the best of intentions. You can say, okay, today between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, I'm going to take a 2-hour break to study whatever I need to study. You say that to yourself. And then all of a sudden 7 o'clock at night rolls around and you realize you never studied it. You got sidetracked. There were other things that came up, other things that seemed important at the time, and you never ended up studying. And that happens day after day after day. I can't stress enough, try to find a consistent time every day, Monday through Friday, and on the weekends that you're going to dedicate to your studying. Whatever that time is, make it consistent. And don't let anything intrude upon that unless your house is burning down around you or there's a zombie apocalypse or something going on. But other than that, Don't let anything intrude on your dedicated study time, and put it on your calendar. Becoming overwhelmed. This is real easy, right? I mean, there is so much stuff to know in the CCNA, and especially when you start out and you get the books and each book is like that thick, real easy to get overwhelmed. Some pointers I would have for that, I've got some notes here for myself. Number one, concentrate on what you're learning today. Don't think about all the stuff you have yet to learn. Don't think about the hundreds of pages you haven't gone through yet. Just focus your attention on whatever topic, whatever chapter you're studying today. Don't get beyond that. Number two, really make good use of those flashcards. Rely on those flashcards to help you retain what you remembered yesterday. The older stuff, the stuff you learned last week or last month, your flashcards are your best friend. Go through that frequently. As a matter of fact, what you might want to do is incorporate into your studying process. As an example, if you're going to dedicate from 7 o'clock till 9 o'clock every night for your CCNA studying, you might want to say, okay, this is the way I'm going to structure it. From 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock is going to be pure study time. That's when I'm going to watch my videos, create my new flashcards, read my books. That's the first hour. From 8 o'clock until 8:45 is going to be lab time. That's why I'm going to log into Packet Tracer and try to create labs, practice some of the stuff I learned. From 8:45 until 9, that's going to be pure flashcard time. That's why I'm going to be testing myself for 15 minutes solid on my flashcards, and I'm going to make sure to go through my old flashcards as well. But definitely incorporate the flashcards every single day. Every single day you should be testing yourself. And also, create your own labs. As I mentioned, when you're doing labs, it's great to follow our workbooks or other people's labs, but the more of your own creativity, the more of your own imagination you put into it, the more you're going to get. Intentionally try to break things. For example, make a lab where you got routing working and then ask yourself, according to the books, if these three things don't line up, if they don't match, these two routers will not talk to each other. Well, I wonder what that would look like. Let me go ahead and break it. Let me intentionally make one or two of those three things not line up and see, what do I see? Is there some command I can turn on that will display what I already know to be true, which is that something's not lined up correctly? So intentionally break your own lab so you get used to seeing what happens, what kind of messages they send forth when you do that. And make your labs more and more complicated, more and more layered. In other words, what I mean by that is, maybe right now you're doing a lab on two routers speaking EIGRP or RIP to each other. Well, you could do that, but if you think about it, leading up to that point, you studied IP addressing and subnetting, you studied some switching stuff. So why not say, how do I incorporate some of that older stuff into this routing lab? I know, let me start out by subnetting something. Let me start out with a Class A or a Class B network and see if I can subnet that to support 10 hosts. All right, number two, let me put a switch in the middle there. Let me configure VLANs on that switch. Let me configure trunking between the switch and the routers just to refresh myself on some of that older stuff. And then once I've got that working, now let's do the routing on top of that. So you're making your labs more and more complicated. You're layering one technology on top of the other to where towards the end of your studying time, your one objective should only be doable or accomplished if 5 or 6 other things fall into place. Another common pitfall, not learning IP addressing and subnetting really well. You do not want to walk into the CCNA and give something like this. Right? If you see a question that is something like that, you don't want to say, oh, /29, okay, let's see here. That's, oh my gosh, I think that's 255 is it 224? You don't want to waste your time doing that. You want to walk into the CCNA having your subnetting and your IP addressing down cold. You want to know subnet masks like the back of your hand. if there's nothing else you do, make sure that you know that topic really, really well. Otherwise, you could burn up a whole lot of time doing basic binary when you could be doing other questions. And what I call neglecting the trivial points. What's this talking about? So there are a lot of numbers that you have to know as you go through the CCNA exam. Things a lot of times people say, oh, I don't have to memorize that. I can look that up online. Nobody needs to know that stuff, like TCP and UDP port numbers for things, like IP protocol numbers for things. Like when a book says, here's an EIGRP hello and dead interval, those timers. Timers for when packets go out, when packets are supposed to be received. All those numbers, what I call trivial points, you got to memorize those. Once again, use your flashcards. You will be given questions testing your memorization on those numbers. Now, yes, it's true. In the real world, once you get a job in networking, you don't necessarily have to have those memorized. You can, in 15 seconds, find out what the TCP port number is for Telnet or HTTP. You don't have to have it in your brain. But for the purpose of the test, yes, you do. You have to have it memorized. So that concludes the section that I called Common Pitfalls. And let me see if there's any Q&A that I can help with. The most recent question I see here is, does spanning tree, STP, will get covered in CCNA sessions? If by CCNA sessions you're talking about these YouTube sessions, we don't have a technical topic. How do I phrase that? These sessions are every single month, these CCNA kickoffs, because every single month there's somebody who's preparing to take their CCNA. The only other YouTube sessions I have on the calendar, I have one coming up in about 2 weeks called Introduction to Networking Technologies. And that's where I go over the real basics of, what's an Ethernet cable, what type of cable, what's a cable modem, what's the concept of a LAN and WAN. But as far as other topics like spanning tree or other stuff, right now, we don't have that on the calendar. We don't have that scheduled. We might do that in the future, but right now we don't have that on the calendar. So we have videos on that stuff, but nothing in the live YouTube calendar as of yet. Are there any other questions I can answer? All right, everyone. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. And believe it or not, that was my last topic. So thank you, everybody, for watching this CCNA kickoff today. I hope it was useful for you. For those of you who are thinking of pursuing your CCNA, I hope you realize now that it should not be as daunting as you might have thought. There are techniques, there are a lot of tools and resources out there to help you. I am one of them. And I wish you the best in your pursuits of your CCNA. We also have CCNA boot camps here. I think we have that in the ads as well. I have a CCNA boot camp just next week here in RTP. Not too late for you to sign up for that if you want to. I'll be teaching that here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we have them every once in a while. So, but whatever method you choose, whatever studying tips, tricks, and techniques you use, I wish you the best. I hope that you are one of those minority of people that actually passes your test on the first try. And I hope this video series was useful to you. So good luck, and I'll see you all in the next session.